On Two Wheels this week, a look back at some of the top bikes we've ridden this year. The 750 for a number of years has been at the top of many people's shopping lists when looking for a high-performance sports machine. But more and more people are now moving down a bracket to the 600 class. And it's fair to say that Suzuki have never really had a serious contender. That was until 1997, when they released this, the GSXR 600. It really is very similar to the 750 in many ways. This twin spar aluminium frame is in fact exactly the same. The swing arm, however, is different, hasn't got the big brace across it that you'll find on the bigger bike, and it means the whole geometry is different and gives it a shorter wheelbase. In fact, the shortest wheelbase of any of the 600cc sports class. Front suspension is different. Here we've got 45mm shower suspension, adjustable for rebound and preload, and at the back, everything you'd expect to find on a high-performance machine. Monoshock with remote reservoir, and that's fully adjustable for preload, rebound damping and compression. And if you can't find something to suit you the way you ride in that lot, then quite frankly I should give up. Perhaps the most striking similarity is of course the distinctive GSXR shape and the bodywork. It is, believe it or not, exactly the same. So how does it all work? Well, the short answer is very, very well. You've got 600cc of inline 4-cylinder, which Suzuki claim produces 104 brake horsepower, and it'll take you to a top speed of 156 miles per hour. The engine is very, very revvy, very buzzy, and the red line doesn't appear till an incredible 13,500 RPM, and you really do need to be pushing it at over 7,000 RPM to get anything like decent performance. I reckon you could plonk a non-sports bike rider on this, and they'd quite happily tootle around all day at maybe below 6,000 RPM. They'd bring it back and they'd wonder what all the fuss was about, because below that you really don't get any kind of performance. But if you're willing to push the revs hard, it really does come to life.
This bike isn't all about racing, even though you feel like it is sometimes. It's still a bike for the road. Ninja it might say, but Howling Wolf it is. Responsible is that musical airbox under the tank, making the most wonderful noises. It's as if air is being drawn through some giant mouth organ. It's absolutely brilliant and can keep you entertained for hours, zipping up and down the 6-speed box like some displaced tap dancer. Yes, no doubt about it, entertainment is this quacker's forte. 14,000 revs comes up in no time at all, making it hard to realise you're on a 600. But ease off a touch and you have a tractable 600 pulling away smoothly, until that Banshee Whale starts at around 8 grand and you're off again, playing races. Producing an absolutely amazing 106 brake from the 599cc motor, this is the most potent road bike the 600 class has yet seen and will be the benchmark for the new Yamaha R6 to beat. But it's not all Looney Tune stuff. There is life below 8 grand. It's just that above that is where the real fun starts. Chassis-wise, it's a beaut. It's light at 176 kilo and it's chuckable but not frisky. In fact, it's got suspension that's perfectly matched to whatever you want to do. It feels on the soft side at lower speed, but seems to firm up the faster you go, just the way it should be. It's a short, cobby bike, but doesn't feel too small, and there's plenty of room to move about on the big seat, which incidentally isn't as comfortable as it looks. Numb bum sets in at around 100 miles. But at least the fairing is surprisingly effective at keeping you out of the elements. Brakes are what we've come to expect, smooth, powerful and progressive. So what more can you say? only that you get a 2-year warranty and a guarantee of fun on this ball of fire, and all for around 7,500 on the road. Mean or green, it can be both, but the meaner the better.
I have to admit that my first impressions of the Fazer were that it looked like a load of old Yamahas stuck together. There certainly seems to be a bit of XJ600 in there, maybe a bit of FJ1200, and one or two other bits and pieces that seem to have been borrowed from previous models. But one thing is for sure, if you covered up all the badges and asked people to name the make, most of them would say it's most definitely a Yamaha. So 10 out of 10 to the design team. The engine too is borrowed from another model. It's the same 600cc inline 4 which powers the Thundercat, and we all know how good that is. It'll produce 95 brake horsepower and take this bike to a top speed of 140 miles per hour. The only big difference is the way the engine is actually mounted in the bike. On the Fazer it's more upright, the Thundercat slopes forward more. Doesn't make much difference, but it has allowed the use of this new double cradle frame. Something else you'll recognise as very Thundercat and even Thunder Ace are these fancy coloured brake calipers. Up at the front here we've got a pair of 4-pot calipers gripping 298mm discs, and they are fantastic, give incredible stopping power, believe me. And at the back, pretty basic, a twin-pot caliper hangs down at the bottom of a 245mm disc. Well, that's most of the boring bits out of the way. Let's go and find out what really matters. The Fazer is a very, very comfortable bike to ride. It's an easy bike to ride. Quite happy to be taken to the office and back 5 days a week, and equally happy giving the boy racers a run for their money along the twisty lanes. High handlebars and a decent sized seat encourage a fairly upright riding position, and with that comes an excellent view of all that's around you, be that traffic in the city or miles of rolling countryside. Power delivery is smooth and progressive from this gorgeous 600cc motor, although I have to say that after a couple of hours in the saddle there was a slightly annoying buzz coming through the foot pegs. A small price to pay, I suppose, for a motor that's as lively as this.
In fact, this bike is absolutely loaded with technology. But it's on the road that all this technology comes to life. The engine has that unique blend of smooth 4 and V twin grunt that not only gives it a nice sound and an even better feel, it also gives it stonking low down power to catapult you off the line or slingshot you out of corners. It also has the strange ability to be relaxed at any speed, trickling along at 30 miles an hour, purring like a big contented cat at 50 or 60, or tearing along at a ton plus. It all seems so natural to the VFR. This is one of the most comfortable bikes I have ever ridden. The riding position is spot on, pitching you slightly forward but not too far. Remove the seat hump and the seat is plenty big enough for 2-up riding or for loading up with soft luggage. Riding back from the Bol d'Or, I did 630 miles in a day, which is not to be recommended, but it does speak volumes for a bike that can do that without inflicting pain on the rider. The air bubble technology of the screen I'm not too sure about, but it did deflect the worst of the weather, so I'm not complaining. The suspension helps, of course, and coupled to the new frame, it gives this bike a flickability factor equal to many out-and-out sports bikes. But all this is of little use if you can't stop, and here the VFR is a revelation. The braking is so controlled it has to be experienced to be believed. It hasn't got ABS as such, but in effect it has, because try as I might, I certainly couldn't lock up the wheels. With both brakes being applied automatically whenever you operate either lever, the whole bike squats, keeping the weight distribution more even. One day, all bikes will be like this. If ever there was a bike for all reasons and all seasons, this has got to be it. And it comes with a 2-year warranty and Honda's free 2-day training course. At 8,975 on the road, you get a lot of technology for your money and one hell of a bike.
When I heard that BMW were to launch a sports bike, I had to rub my eyes. Surely the firm that isn't exactly renowned for its state-of-the-art styling couldn't produce a sports bike to compete for sales with Honda's VFR and Ducati's ST2, amongst others. And then this arrived, the R1100S. Very different for a BMW, and depending on which end you approach it from, very Italian or very German. And an 8-valve flat twin in a sports bike. What were they thinking of? Well, they've obviously thought long and hard about this bike. It certainly handles as well as any other BMW I've ridden. It's not the fastest thing on two wheels, but it is quite comfy. And there's plenty of low-down grunt from the 98 brake horsepower Boxer twin. First impressions on the road are really not that bad. But that front end, Coming up after the break, yet more bikes, Yamaha's giant cruiser, the Royal Star, Motor Guzz's Centuro, BMW's giant trail bike, the 1100 GS, and of course, the amazing Yamaha YZF R1. Many people will ask me, what's the best bike to buy? And of course, there are as many different answers to that as there are bikes on the road. And these days, with so many different classes of bike available, you really need to be clear on what you want your bike to do. For example, you wouldn't buy a touring machine like this if you wanted to go and do track days. And you wouldn't buy a race replica, something like an R1, if all you ever did was went to the office and back 5 days a week. But some people want to buy a bike just to impress their neighbours and perhaps their non-biking mates. And if that's the case, it needs to be physically massive. And of course, it definitely needs lots of nice shiny bits. So here we are, a Yamaha XVZ Royal Star. Yamaha released the Royal Star into an already quite crowded world of custom cruisers back in 1996. At 1300cc, the liquid-cooled V4 engine is bigger than some family cars, and it takes up nearly as much room on the road. It's certainly a bike that lends itself to aftermarket bits and pieces, and there's plenty of scope for adding your own personal touch, should you feel the need to stand out from the crowd even more. You'll never be first to arrive at the local bike gathering on a Royal Star, but you will arrive in supreme comfort. High bars and forward-mounted floorboards encourage you to almost slouch into the luxurious padded seat. Power delivery through the shaft drive is smooth, with surprisingly little vibration from the big V4. In fact, you'll sometimes leave it in too high a gear on purpose, just to enjoy the bucket loads of torque as you accelerate out of a bend. It might not have that famous American name sitting on the petrol tank, but doesn't it look just as good?
Now, I know what some of you might be thinking, all very well, but it's Italian, unreliable. No, they're not anymore. And to prove the point, a 3-year warranty on this. Now, you can't argue with that, can you? But even if you did argue with it, it's got 3 years of AA breakdown cover as well. So what's your problem? Maintenance-free shaft drive at the back, so this could well be your bike for the millennium. If heavy metal is your music, you'll rave over the Centuro. It's bold, it's brash and lumpy, and no compromise bike for those who dare to be different. It's got brutish, ballsy looks and goes in the same way. Sharing its 992 V-twin motor with the Daytona sports bike, it's not short of poke. but it really comes unsung at around 5,000 revs, revving out to a red line at just over 8 grand. Up to 5 it feels less busy, as though it shouldn't be there, and quite right too. But despite that, you've still got 95 brake to play with, which is more than enough to blow the cobwebs away. For a big twin, it's remarkably smooth too, in a lumpy custard sort of way. No real vibes, but great gobs of power. It's lower geared than the Daytona, but the 5-speed box will still take you to 130 plus. The longest wheelbase has advantages in the stability department, especially on long, fast bends, and doesn't seem to work against it in the twisties either. Likewise, the White Power suspension copes well with smooth roads, but bumps and ridges can catch out the rear shock. The frame is very taut, and even with the firm suspension, you can still have a lot of fun hammering along. Somehow, it all seems to be part of the feel of the bike. The riding position is different too. One-piece pull-back bars and slightly rear-set rests tip you nicely forward to counter the wind blast neatly deflected by the small nose fairing. Brakes are typically belting Brembos and have no trouble in taming this 224 kilos of Italian stallion. This is not a bike for the faint-hearted. It's full of character and quirkiness, and at 8,250 it's also not for everyone. But then again, neither is heavy metal.
Well, if you're going to have one, you might as well have a big one. And it don't come much bigger than this. This is BMW's R1100 GS. The sort of thing that when you look at it, you either go, wow, yes, great, I want one. Or you say, oh dear, what on earth went wrong with that? Either way, if there was ever a bike built that was guaranteed to put a smile on your face as you're riding, this is it. The GS is deceptively quick, and I've surprised one or two sports bike riders over the last couple of weeks, I can tell you. It's easy to find yourself doing 70 or 80 mile an hour before you even realise it, because this Boxer twin is so smooth. It's BMW's flat twin with 4 valves per cylinder, and it kicks out around 80 brake horsepower from its 1100 cc's. It's an unusual looking bike in more ways than one. The front suspension is the now famed BMW telelever system, and it's quite easy to see exactly what's going on. You've got this wishbone-shaped metal strut here and a monoshock up there. All looks very odd, but it does work very well. It makes the bike very, very stable. But it means it doesn't actually dip at the front when you're braking. And that takes a little bit of getting used to, but it's fine once you get the hang of it. It also makes for great conversations and much pointing of fingers at the local bike gathering.
The suspension is not so much firm as beautifully controlled, making for spot-on road holding. It's not super light at 190 kilos, 13 up on an R1, but who's counting? Brakes are absolutely superb and need to be, with the ubiquitous 320mm Brembo discs up front, but this time cast iron, and 4-pot calipers and a single disc at the rear. Creature comforts are few. The fairing is as lovely as ever, but the screen is for racing. If you want protection, get an ST2. The riding position is just that. It's the only position to be in on a bike like this. So if you're mentally comfortable, you'll be comfortable, because to pootle around on this unique icon of our time is an insult. At £20,500, you've got to be rich, and with only 200 made, you've got to be quick. Not cheap, but it is Italian. It's life to the full, so live it that way. La dolce vita, as the Romans would say.
The whole system is programmed to give a massive boost to the mid-range torque between 5,000 and about 7,500 revs. It's all very, very clever stuff. It's not until you hit the open road that you start to realise just how clever it is. The motor is gorgeous at any revs, but really comes to life about 7,000. And from then on, it's hold on tight for some eye-popping, arm-wrenching acceleration, which will see you topping 170 miles per hour. So objective number one, the most powerful sports bike, not only achieved, well and truly smashed. Everything about the bike really is small, very compact. To look at physically, it's only about the size of a 600. And once you climb aboard, it only feels like maybe a 400. With a bomb under the seat. And it explodes into life like nothing you've ever ridden. Its small physical size and lightweight help to make the R1 feel really manageable and almost encourages you to push things perhaps a little further than you would normally. It's great fun trying to keep the front wheel in contact with the tarmac. The riding position has you stretched over the tank, reaching to the low bars in real racetrack style. The handling is faultless, sharp, precise, yet predictable with no nasty twitches or surprises, no matter how you ride it. Front and rear suspension is fully adjustable, although the factory settings are so good that there's absolutely no need for any fiddling in this department. Leave well alone and just enjoy the ride. The 6-speed gearbox is smooth and very positive, and working the motor hard as you flick through it will see you attaining ridiculous speeds before you can say fixed penalty. Fortunately, everything comes to a rapid halt thanks to the excellent one-piece calipers up front, gripping a pair of 298mm discs. An R1 may not be for everyone, but in a list of biking things to do, a blast on one of these should definitely be in your top 10. On Two Wheels next week, as the temperatures drop, many bikes are wrapped up for the winter. But Wayne has some advice for those of us still braving the elements.